The Dead Sea is the lowest exposed point on Earth. Its surface sits more than 400 meters below sea level, in a rift valley between Israel, Jordan, and the occupied West Bank. For thousands of years, it has been one of the most recognizable bodies of water on the planet, famous for salt concentrations so extreme that nothing can live in it, and bathers float without effort. It is disappearing. Before we dive in, this channel explores the hidden worlds buried beneath the surface. Hit that subscribe button. Let's get into it. In the last 50 years, the Dead Sea has lost more than a third of its surface area. Its water level has dropped over 30 meters. The shoreline is retreating at a rate of roughly 1 meter per year. Beaches that drew tourists from around the world in the 1980s are now stranded hundreds of meters from the water's edge. Resort infrastructure built along the shore, including piers, parking lots, lifeguard stations, and barbecue areas, has been abandoned as the waterline pulled away, and the ground beneath it began to collapse. What is emerging from below is something nobody planned for. The Dead Sea sits in what geologists call a pull-apart basin, a depression created by the lateral movement of tectonic plates along the Dead Sea Transform Fault. The basin has been collecting water and sediment for millions of years. The lake itself in its current form is the remnant of a series of larger ancient lakes that filled the Rift Valley during wetter periods of the Earth's climate history. The deepest of these predecessors, Lake Lisan, existed during the last ice age and was more than twice the size of the Dead Sea today. At its maximum extent, roughly 26,000 years ago, Lake Lisan stretched over 200 kilometers through the Jordan Rift Valley, connecting the Sea of Galilee to what is now the Arava Desert south of the Dead Sea. Its surface stood nearly 200 meters higher than the Dead Sea does today. When the Ice Age ended and the climate warmed, Lake Lisan began to evaporate. Over thousands of years, it shrank and concentrated, leaving behind a thick sequence of sediment layers, fine white marls, gypsum bands, and crystallized salt that now form the geological foundation of the Dead Sea Basin. These layers are a climate archive. Each band records a season of evaporation or a period of rainfall. Some layers contain pollen that tells scientists what was growing in the valley 10,000 years ago. Others contain the chemical signatures of volcanic eruptions on the other side of the world. The sediment record beneath the Dead Sea is one of the longest continuous climate archives in the Middle East, and much of it has never been studied because it has been sealed beneath the water. As the climate warmed and dried, the lake shrank further. What remained was a body of water with no outlet. The Jordan River feeds it from the north, but the water has nowhere to go except into the air. Evaporation, driven by the extreme desert heat and low humidity of the Rift Valley, has always been the Dead Sea's primary mechanism of water loss. For millennia, the inflow from the Jordan River roughly balanced the evaporation, and the lake remained stable. That balance was broken in the 20th century. Beginning in the 1960s, Israel, Jordan, and Syria began diverting massive quantities of water from the Jordan River and its tributaries for agriculture, drinking water, and industrial use. Israel's national water carrier, completed in 1964, redirected water from the Sea of Galilee to irrigate farms across the country. Jordan built its own canal system along the Yarmouk River. Syria dammed upstream tributaries. By some estimates, the Jordan River now delivers less than 10% of its historical flow to the Dead Sea. At the same time, the Dead Sea Works and Arab Potash Company, industrial operations on the Israeli and Jordanian sides respectively, began pumping massive volumes of Dead Sea water into evaporation ponds to extract potash, magnesium, and bromine. The southern basin of the Dead Sea, which was once a shallow extension of the lake, has been entirely converted into a grid of industrial evaporation pools. It no longer exists as a natural body of water. The combination of upstream diversion and industrial extraction has drained the Dead Sea faster than natural evaporation ever could. The result is a body of water in free fall, losing volume every year with no mechanism to recover it. And as the water drops, the land around it is collapsing. The Dead Sea's shoreline sits on a thick layer of underground salt deposits, laid down over thousands of years as the saline water saturated the surrounding soil. As the lake recedes, fresh groundwater from nearby aquifers flows into the vacated space and dissolves these salt deposits from below. Without the structural support of the salt, the ground above gives way. The result is sinkholes, thousands of them. They appear without warning. One moment the ground is solid, the next it opens. The collapse can be gradual, a slow settling that cracks pavement and tilts lampposts over the course of weeks. Or it can be instantaneous, the earth giving way in a single event, dropping everything on the surface into a pit that can be 10 meters deep or more. There is no reliable way to predict where the next one will form. The Israel Geological Institute monitors the shoreline from space using satellite imagery, tracking subtle changes in surface elevation that might indicate a cavity forming below. But the science is imprecise. The sinkholes do not announce themselves. Sinkholes have consumed sections of Road 90, Israel's longest highway, which runs parallel to the Dead Sea shore. In one section, the asphalt simply dropped into the earth, leaving a gap in the road as though a piece had been cut out with a knife. Date palm farms that once lined the shoreline have been abandoned because the ground beneath the groves is too unstable for workers to enter safely. The trees still stand in some places, their roots dangling over the edges of newly opened pits. At the Ein Gedi Resort, once the flagship tourist destination on the Israeli shore, the destruction is complete. A sinkhole opened in the parking lot, then another in the access road, then the beach itself began to fracture. The resort was closed, then abandoned. Today, the site is a ghost landscape of rusted beach chairs, collapsed fences, overturned lampposts, and crumbling concrete walkways, all surrounded by craters that continue to grow and merge. A barbecue set still sits on the shoreline. The beach umbrellas are still there, corroded and bent. The sea is now 3 kilometers away. A 2017 study counted over 5,500 sinkholes along the shoreline. The number has increased every year since. From above, the Dead Sea's perimeter now resembles the surface of another planet, a pockmarked moonscape of white salt crust, deep circular pits, and exposed geological layers that have not seen daylight in millennia. And this is where the story shifts from environmental catastrophe to something older and stranger. As the shoreline recedes and the ground cracks open, it is exposing material that has been sealed beneath the surface of the Dead Sea region for thousands of years. Salt formations of extraordinary complexity are emerging from the retreating waterline, crystalline towers and ridges that formed underwater and have never been exposed to the atmosphere. Freshwater springs, previously submerged beneath the salt lake, are now surfacing in the newly exposed terrain, filling some of the sinkholes with warm, mineral-rich pools where microbial life is being found in conditions that were previously considered sterile. In 2011, scientists from the Max Planck Institute sent divers to the floor of the Dead Sea to investigate freshwater springs that had been detected along the lake bottom. What they found left the scientific community surprised. The springs were surrounded by biofilms, thin layers of microbial life clinging to the rocks around the freshwater outlets. Life in a body of water defined by its lifelessness. The organisms were surviving in narrow zones where fresh and salt water mixed at specific concentrations, microhabitats that had been sealed beneath the Dead Sea's surface for an unknown period of time. But it is the archaeological dimension that gives this landscape its deepest resonance. The Dead Sea region is one of the most archaeologically dense corridors on Earth. The dry air, the extreme salinity, and the sealed cave environments have preserved materials here that would have decomposed anywhere else: leather, papyrus, wood, textiles, organic residues. The Rift Valley is a natural preservation chamber. and it has been collecting human traces for at least 10,000 years. The most famous of those traces are the Dead Sea Scrolls. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd named Mohammed Ed-Dib was searching for a lost goat in the cliffs above the northwestern shore when he threw a stone into a cave opening and heard something shatter. He climbed in and found tall ceramic jars, some still sealed, containing leather scrolls wrapped in linen cloth. He had no idea what they were. He brought them to a cobbler and antiquities dealer in Bethlehem, who sold some to a scholar at Hebrew University and others to the Syrian Orthodox Archbishop of Jerusalem. It took 2 years before the scholarly world fully understood what had been found. The scrolls dated from the 3rd century before the Common Era to the 1st century of the Common Era. They included copies of nearly every book of the Hebrew Bible, some of them 1,000 years older than any previously known manuscript. They included sectarian writings, hymns, legal codes, and apocalyptic texts produced by a Jewish community that lived at the nearby settlement of Qumran. They included a copper scroll that appeared to list the locations of hidden treasures across the Judean desert, a document that has never been fully decoded. Between 1947 and 1956, in a frantic race between Bedouin treasure hunters and professional archaeologists, 11 caves were found containing scroll material. Roughly 900 manuscripts and over 15,000 fragments were recovered. The discovery reshaped the understanding of how the Bible was written, copied, and transmitted. It revealed a Jewish community living in deliberate isolation on the edge of the Dead Sea, preparing for an apocalyptic war between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, a group so convinced of the coming end that they hid their entire library in the cliffs before the Roman army arrived in 68 of the Common Era. The Romans destroyed Qumran. The scrolls stayed in the caves. For 1,900 years, no one touched them. In 2017, archaeologists announced the discovery of a 12th cave. It had been looted decades earlier, probably in the 1950s, but still contained broken storage jars, a blank parchment, and fragments that confirmed scrolls had once been there. Researchers involved in the excavation stated that the caves of Qumran had been surveyed in the 1950s, but never properly excavated. The original teams entered, grabbed what they could find, and left. No fine sifting of materials, no systematic dig. The possibility that additional caves exist, still sealed, still containing manuscripts, has not been ruled out. The Dead Sea region also holds the ruins of Masada, the clifftop fortress built by Herod the Great and later occupied by Jewish rebels during the First Jewish Revolt against Rome. In 73 of the Common Era, after a prolonged siege, the Roman 10th Legion built a massive earthen ramp up the western face of the cliff and breached the walls. According to the ancient historian Josephus, the 960 defenders chose mass suicide rather than capture. The fortress, with its palaces, bathhouses, storerooms, and synagogue, was preserved by the dry desert air and remained largely intact for nearly 2,000 years. It was excavated in the 1960s and is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It holds the ancient settlement of Ein Gedi, a lush, freshwater oasis fed by springs flowing from the Judean hills, mentioned in the Song of Solomon and in the story of David hiding from King Saul. Ein Gedi was a prosperous agricultural community for centuries, producing balsam perfume that was traded across the ancient world. Today, the oasis still flows, but the landscape around it has been transformed. The resort built at its base is destroyed. The fields are abandoned. The Dead Sea, which once lapped at the edge of the settlement, is now kilometers away. The oasis sits surrounded by a cratered wasteland of sinkholes, a green dot in a landscape of white salt and collapsed earth. As the Dead Sea drops, the geological and hydrological systems that have kept this region stable for millennia are shifting. The aquifers are moving, the salt layers are dissolving, the ground is opening. Material that has been buried or submerged since before the Roman Empire is being brought to the surface by a process that nobody can stop and nobody fully controls. The Dead Sea has dropped 30 meters. It will continue to drop. The Jordan River is not coming back to its historical flow. The industrial extraction is not going to stop. The evaporation is not going to slow. Every projection published in the last decade shows the same trajectory: continued shrinkage, continued subsidence, continued exposure of what was once sealed beneath the waterline. The Ein-Gedi beach, where tourists floated in the 1980s, is now a restricted zone. The road that once ran along the shore has partially collapsed into a sinkhole. Farmers who grew watermelons and basil on the shoreline have abandoned their fields because the ground is no longer safe to walk on. Tour guides now lead hikers through the sinkhole landscape on carefully marked paths, warning them not to step too close to the edges because the earth can give way at any moment. The Dead Sea is the lowest point on the surface of the earth. It has been there for tens of thousands of years, collecting water, salt, sediment, and the traces of every civilization that has lived along its shores. Now the water is leaving, and the things it kept hidden are coming into the light. Nobody decided to drain it for this purpose. Nobody planned an excavation. The Dead Sea is conducting its own archaeology, 1 meter of recession at a time, opening the ground, exposing the layers, and revealing what was sealed beneath the surface of the oldest, saltiest, lowest body of water on the planet. Whatever is down there, the water is no longer deep enough to keep it hidden. Thanks for watching. If this is the kind of exploration you want to follow, subscribe. There is more to come.